The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Welcome back to Sustainable Voice. This is Ashish, and as you can tell, I'm not in my home studio, and no, I haven't magically bought a mansion somewhere. I am actually in the Bwindi forest in Uganda. I've done 2 days of gorilla trekking. I've been in Africa for 3 weeks, which is why I look a bit rougher around the edges. And for what I can tell, and for what I've been asking everybody, this is the first podcast ever recorded live from Bwindi. So I thought that was pretty exceptional. Hi, Leigh.
Hi, Ashish. I'm excited to be here with you and virtually in Bwindi with you. This is the coolest.
You know, considering the topic we're going to be talking about today, I thought that it was actually really cool in that, I'm from Kenya originally. My wife's family is from Uganda. So East Africa is where my story began. And we're talking about a path forward for our country. There's no better example of this than Uganda, and Peru applies here. So I thought, why not record this podcast from the place that epitomizes what that story looks like?
I love that. And I love that we can draw those parallels and learn from that. And I'm sure that that is ongoing and always evolving. So I'm sure you've picked up you've seen a few new things even since the last time you were in Uganda.
You have no idea. Well, let's jump in. We're talking today about the path forward after protests, how tourism can heal a country. And, last episode, I think I went off on not a rant, but I was pretty passionate about sharing my thoughts about tourism officers who don't take their position seriously. So I'm probably going to continue that rant. So I think we're probably going to make a lot of people happy and a few people pretty upset. And you know what? Don't really care.
You were fired up. I don't think I've ever seen you so fired up, but that's how change happens, is when we get that fire inside and we're able to express it. So I'm here for the ride. So it's fine. Let's see what else you got inside you.
Well, it's perfect because we were talking just about Peru and talking about this aspect and talking about how a country can heal post-protest. Everybody knows Uganda's story. So my wife's family is actually from Uganda. They were pushed out by Idi Amin. There is no country that exemplifies what I'm talking about better than countries like Rwanda or Uganda or Sri Lanka or Colombia. So you've got a lot of these countries that exemplify this. You got Uganda, Rwanda, Sri Lanka. Then there's Colombia. There's a bunch more that are there. Peru has that opportunity right now. They did it once before, but clearly what they're doing isn't working. When you have 11 presidents in 22 years or whatever the phase is, it clearly isn't working. However, that is the path going forward. And tourism is the only way that it works. If you look at Uganda as a microcosm, as a parallel to Peru, and take a look at it, you've got mining in certain sectors. You've got tourism as a major aspect here, and tourism as a provider for the Batwa communities here. You've got tourism as a provider for the communities up in Kibali Forest. You've got now a diversity coming into Queen Elizabeth National Park. You've got hotels coming in that are building here, and you see tourism actually starting to thrive in this country. You see it starting to come alive, and you can see a country that has been through, that has been through a pandemic, that has been through terrorism, that has been through, just by sheer location of where they are, countless challenges, and yet they keep getting up and they find ways to heal through tourism. And I found myself literally today on a gorilla trek, and I've been, going after these families and looking at these gorillas, and I just thought to myself, I said, this is magical. And I said, I don't understand how a country like Uganda, which everybody thinks is backwards, which it clearly isn't, is able to get this right. Meanwhile, a country like Peru, the ministers can't get out of their own way. If it's not something about politics, it's about allowing more people into Machu Picchu. It's about doing everything other than what they're supposed to be doing.
So as you compare the two, what's the difference? Is Uganda more... is the government less involved or more involved in tourism? Is that in any way factoring in?
It's more involved. It's definitely more involved. In fact, I'm looking outside to see if it stopped raining because I want to take you outside. But they're more involved with the Wildlife Authority, with everything else, but not involved in an overbearing way. Now, is it perfect? Of course not. Are there challenges? Of course there are. right? No country is perfect. Any country who tells you they have it down to a science is lying. I mean, our own country can't get it down to a science. No other country has it down to a science, but there is a path. And you could see where this country came from and what the arch looks like. And that arch just hasn't been followed. And you know what? I'm going to take you outside right now. I know we're recording, but I still want to walk outside to show you. So I'm going to walk with me because I want you to see what this looks like. I want you to see the fact that I'm surrounded by 7 volcanoes. And I want you to see what this looks like. Just the fact that it's magical. And I want to turn around. And I know my video is going to get a bit blurry here, but I'm going to walk backwards because I want to show you what this looks like. Just walk with me here and take a look. I'm going to come through here. And yes, like I said, this is home that you're looking at here. But this place didn't exist a little bit ago, and now it does. This place didn't exist 20 years ago. Now it does. 30% of everything that's done here goes back to the community. If a country like Uganda, which everybody thinks is backwards, gets it right, why can't Peru? Again, take a look at this view just so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. How's that?
It's exceptional. Yeah, stay right where you are. Now you're coming into focus for us. That's amazing. That's so gorgeous. Wow.
I had to come out here, and it rained for a few seconds. It went away, and that was huge. Look, I want to show you something. Somebody noticed that I was sitting outside, and it's coming with a pillow right now so I can sit down. Still think Uganda's backwards?
I love it. I love it. So where exactly, I know we're supposed to be talking about Peru, but where exactly are you? What lodge are you at? And are they, since we're talking about government supporting, do they receive government funding or support?
So I'm at the Clouds Lodge in Bwindi, southern Bwindi, in a place called Nkuringo. And it's off the beaten track. It's south of where everybody else goes. Do they get support in certain ways? Of course. But they are so heavily committed to the Batwa community. And this is important because when you go into the community itself, it's not done perfectly. There's a lot of things that could be improved, but the lodge actually has it right. The lodge actually has it in a way that makes sense. And when you take a look at Peru as a correlation, right? Peru gets the community aspect of it perfect. They get the lodge aspect of it perfect. They get so many elements of it right. The government aspect is the weakest aspect there. Right? The fact that the local ministers and everybody else just can't seem to get out of their own way. Whereas here, the community aspect is still being built. They're still trying to find their path. The lodge aspect is still being built out. The infrastructure is still pretty weak and being built out, but it's being done in a way with compassion, with love, with just this laser focus on tourism. There are no brand name hotels here. It just doesn't exist. This place, if you look online, Clouds is considered a 3-star property. Staying here, though, it's the people that work here that bring me back here year after year after year. Same like the hotels that I go to in Peru. They bring me back there year after year after year. The difference is here, they have a clear vision of what they're trying to accomplish. They have a clear vision on what they're trying to do in everything else. A clear vision on what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, because they believe in what they're doing. And nobody is standing in their way. Right? Nobody is standing in their way. Uganda is actually very actively out there. They don't have money like Peru does to try to promote tourism. They don't have that kind of money, yet they still do an effective job. Right? And that's it. I'm actually here with somebody who is one of the most noted communications experts in all of North America. She just got her PhD. She's here with me, along with another travel advisor who's with me. And she's blown away by this. She was with me in Peru as well, and she was blown away by what was happening in Peru, but she also knows my frustration. So my correlation is that Peru has a path forward. The people getting in the way aren't the people working in tourism. The people getting in the way are the people wearing 3-piece suits who run off to Spain. They're the ones getting in the way.
Oh boy, that's a lot to unpack. So, the first thing that comes to mind, maybe I don't know if we even want to go there. I think about corruption. I think like, why? There's got to be more to it. Is it prestige of position? Is it what would be the motivation for not wanting to support local economies, micro economies?
That's a great question. And I actually have thought about that. And by the way, let's go wherever you want to go. I'm not holding back today. And like I said, if we make some people unhappy, so be it. You know what? They need to hear us. So, and if I'm not going to say it, then who? I had a chance to say it to their face. They ran off instead. So, in fact, I'll have an open invitation to anybody who works in the ministry's office in Peru who would like a hand to understand what it would take to get Peru back on track and what they're sitting on as a gold mine. Come on this podcast. Come sit with me. I won't argue with you. I won't debate with you, but I will talk to you and tell you what you need to do. I'll start by telling you to get your head out of your ass. But beyond that, I'll be able to actually then go and be able to talk to you about what you need to do as a country to start developing. See, to what you just asked, I have thought about that. When you go to Peru, everything focuses in on Machu Picchu. Everything. Even though you have the 5th highest freestanding waterfall up in the north, it never gets talked about. You have some of the oldest mummies that date back to the Roman Empire when they were conquering Egypt, that date back to that period. They hardly get talked about. They don't get any funding. You know, you've got all of that. You've got the Patagonia of Peru, 6 hours away from Lima. It never gets talked about. The infrastructure is still not there. It should be, but it seems like everybody is on strike every other week because of something that they're unhappy about. You cross-reference that with here. Uganda doesn't have any one thing. Yes, they've got the gorillas. So wildlife as a whole, the chimpanzees, the gorillas. But beyond that, they have waterfalls here too. They have historic sites and monuments here too. They don't have the money to talk about these things. So they focus in on the community and the aspects. The difference is everybody here, well, I shouldn't say everybody, the people that are connected to tourism here understand that. When you go to parts of Uganda, right, tourism is not number one, mining is number one, tourism is in the top, but everybody knows the direct and indirect connection tourism has. That's why when something happens here, everybody rallies around. When there was an Ebola scare in Uganda last year, the government rallied around, and it was actually really amazing. They didn't come out and say, oh, it's safe, come to Uganda, come to Uganda. They started talking about the case numbers going down. And then they finally said, according to the World Health Organization, Uganda is Ebola free, because they understood very quickly that Ebola and Africa get taken hand in hand over and over again. And there's quite a lot of people who think Africa is a country versus a continent with individual countries that are there. They didn't understand that. They did understand that. Why can't Peru?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if they were sitting there, before you, we could do a dress rehearsal. If you were, let's say you are able to get someone on, what would be your, top 2-3 concrete things that the government could do to further tourism and support these local economies and bring everybody up?
You mean after I insulted them and got myself deported out of the country?
Right. Exactly.
Here are 3 things that I would tell them. And I mean this in all respect, because I have a love for this country. I have a love for Peru. And anybody who's traveled with me there knows this. I go to Peru every October. When my son turned 16, I had a choice of any country I could go to. I chose Peru. I chose to go there. Right. And this is why it pains me, right? Because I've seen a country like Colombia get it right. I've seen a country like Colombia that actually has been in sync and started rowing in the same direction and get it right. So that's the first thing I would tell them, is that you have to make sure your people, your citizens, the people who represent your flag in your country, that they understand the direct and indirect connections they all have to tourism. I don't care if you are a vegetable farmer in Cusco or if you are somebody who's working the roads up in the northern part for the mines or a helicopter pilot. The direct and indirect connection. You must understand it. I'm not saying they all have to work in tourism, but if they all understand the benefit that tourism brings, is 5% of their GDP, and the benefit it brings into their economy and what it represents. Peru is not a big economy, and 5% is a big number. And that's not even an accurate number, but it's pretty close. Then people in the South, people in the North who aren't connected to tourism, they would think twice. They would start dialogue. They would do different things. That's the first thing. The second thing, and look, this is a worldwide problem. You're not going to cure corruption in politics. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to cure it. It's not going to happen. We know that. But I would tell them the second thing that I would say is that we have to check our egos at the door. The agenda has to go out the window. It has to be a simple agenda of how do we feed our economy in a sustainable way? How do we make sure that we're creating jobs for people that frankly are not going to have access to the highest education? How do we make sure that talent doesn't leave our country and go somewhere else? How do we make sure, I don't care if you're a computer programmer, if you work in tourism, whatever the case, how do we do that? That's the second thing. And the third thing, and this is so important, working in tourism should be a badge of honor, not a settlement. It should be a badge of honor. And if you look at Cusco, if you look at Machu Picchu, these guides weren't like a badge of honor, but they clearly, you ask any guide in the Cusco region, they are not being heard. You ask any guide up in the northern part of Peru, they're not being heard. If they're being heard, then places like Illescas would already become a national park. They're not. It's still a private reserve that applies over and over and over again to get funding. It wouldn't. It has to be a badge of honor. I would go with those three things. Mm-hmm. And countries like Uganda have figured it out. You talk to any guide here, they wear it like a badge of honor. And that's a huge change, because when I was a kid in Kenya, I would talk to guides in Kenya when I was younger, and they were an accountant or an engineer and they couldn't find work. And now they're and then they became a guide. You go to these conservancies where you talk to Maasai and Samburu tribes and you ask them, it is a badge of honor that they're working in tourism. It's something they aspire to. You walk through communities here and you ask the children here what they want to be when they grow up. I want to be a pilot. I want to be a driver. I want to be a guide. I want to be a doctor. I want to work in a hotel. It's, yes, of course, astronauts and stuff is there, but they actually revere tourism. We drive down the road here, and for the most part, you hear hello, 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 hello. But then you also hear some other parts where they're not connected, but it's starting to happen. Today, for example, we drove into one part and some of these kids were out saying, hello, hello, I'm starving, give me money. I'm starving, give me money. Mm-hmm. And what happened right away, the driver guide, there was a mechanism to stop that. So that our guide talked to one of the community elders here, who was one of our trekkers, and basically said, you need to call a community meeting with all the family members. Bring these families to this meeting because they have a mechanism to do that because of the community partnership. You need to understand, these kids need to understand, and their parents need to understand that they're undermining the tourism mechanism. They're undermining the partnership that these communities have with tourism to provide for them. If they're not happy, we can adjust. If they need more, we can adjust. But the idea behind this partnership is not to have you on the side of the road going, hello, give me money, I'm starving. The fact that they have a mechanism for this in a country as poor as Uganda is amazing. Mm-hmm. Why can't that mechanism show up in a place like Peru that has money, has the means to do it, but they can't get out of their own way?
Yeah. I have a couple questions for you. Back to the badge of honor real quick. I was thinking about our conversations about Egypt and Egyptologists and how they are revered and well respected and all of that. And I wondered if in Uganda, is there a certification program for guides and trekkers? Like, is there, and does that exist in Peru? I mean, is that a part of it? When you elevate someone, you give them a label, have them prove their competency. Does that somehow lift up the reputation that they have among their neighbors and friends and everybody else?
That's a great question. Yeah, in Uganda there is. In fact, the trekker I spoke to, he started out as an assistant. He then became a guide, but he was a trekker before that, worked his way up, and it was a badge of honor from the community. It does exist here. There is definitely means to go in from there. Now, in the cities, it's a bit different, but when you come out to places like Bwindi, Kibale, yeah, it exists. It doesn't exist everywhere, but it is starting to expand. You go to a place like Colombia, working in tourism is a badge of honor. And, there's no really levels there, but yeah, you aspire to be a guide. You actually go through training here. In Uganda, there's training in how they work within the forest here, especially in Bwindi. How they find their way through this forest, by the way, is beyond me in terms of what they do. But that's part of it. Peru does have that to a certain degree, right? I mean, guides will start out and they become national guides. As in Cusco region, you're pretty established, but in the northern part of Peru, in Chachapoyas, in Illescas, other places like this, they're still learning. But there's no mechanism There's no community partnership there to actually be able to, to bring people from the community and to say, you're going to be a guide. This is a badge of honor for you. It just doesn't exist. Private sector, hotels are doing it. But on the large level, it just doesn't exist. For example, the Uganda Wildlife Authority, which controls the Bwindi forest here, and Clouds Lodge, where I am, the partnership that they have, they work hand in hand with the Wildlife Authority. Again, it's not perfect. I understand that. It's not perfect. But at least it's something, right? For example, in Peru, they just announced increasing the number of visitors to Machu Picchu from 3,500, whatever it was, to 5,500, whatever the number was. That wasn't the problem, but the local minister there started automating and how they do the train tickets and the permits and not the train tickets, the permits. And it was one that actually was eliminating jobs on the ground. And the people there protested, blocked the tracks, closed down Machu Picchu and said, we're not going to do this until you leave. She acquiesced, or it might've been a he, acquiesced. They gave in. It shouldn't have been a point of contention to begin with. If you truly understood why people go to Machu Picchu, you wouldn't have made a boneheaded decision like that.
Right. Okay, so we kind of been Peru bashing, but I don't want people to feel like they shouldn't go to Peru even right now, because I don't think it's completely broken, right? Like, you can still go to Peru and have a great experience, and you need to go, because it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? So you can still have a great experience in Peru, right?
The country, 100%. Yeah, we have been Peru bashing a bit. And it's not country bashing. It's more people who just don't know what they're doing bashing.
Yeah.
People who should know better, right? I mean, that's basically it. Look, I love the country and I love going there. And yes, people should go there. I go there all the time. It is where people go all the time. And when you go up to the northern part, you go to Chachapoyas, you go to Machu Picchu, you go to Cusco, you see this, that people there I'm talking about guides, hoteliers, drivers. They love that you are there. Love that they're there. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, okay? I went to a country I want to say it was Southeast Asia. I forget which country it was. And I had gone into this market and I didn't want to buy anything, but I just walked through and the vendor asked me if I wanted to buy something. And I said, no, gave me the finger, flipped me off, told me F you and walked off. I was shocked that this could happen, but I understood. Maybe it was over tourism, which was the case. Peru, you don't see anybody doing that. There is a gentle approach. People there genuinely love having you there. And that's all I'm trying to say, is that they don't deserve being undermined. They deserve support. They deserve proper support, because people who go there will have a blast. It's the culinary capital of the world. The #1 restaurant in the world is in Lima. The top rated restaurant. Of course, you've got one of the wonders of the world, but then you got the 5th highest freestanding waterfall in the world. You've got now mummies in northern Peru that they found that are now getting museums around the world to re-examine whether the Roman Empire or the Peruvian empires, the Chacha Empire, are connected in some form because of the time frame, how the catacombs looked, and everything else. You've got a reserve up in the north in Illescas that is one of the capitals for kite surfing. And oh, by the way, you're 900 miles off the coast of Galapagos Islands, and some of the animals in the Galapagos migrate here. It's the infrastructure. It's the authenticity. Everything is there. The country has everything one would want to go and just have an amazing, amazing time, just like Colombia does. The difference is that Colombia executed the plan properly because everybody believed in tourism. When you go to Peru, there has not been a good enough job being done to actually get everybody to understand how they are connected directly or indirectly to tourism. A vegetable farmer who I spoke to, as I mentioned to you last time, who didn't know who was buying her vegetables and didn't care, or the fact that somebody was paying protesters to go out there and protest. I'm talking about, 2022, end of 2022 when this happened. There's the mechanism is not there to bring everybody together, and it needs to be there because this country has literally everything. And oh, by the way, it also has a budget to provide for this. It has a budget to do this properly. And, and look, I get it that ministers have bosses, they have bureaucracy. I get it. But you either want tourism or you don't, right? So if you want tourism, then embrace the people who are embracing you. And if you don't want tourism, then shut the airports, close the borders, and tell people to go somewhere else, right? That's essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is you got to pick one or the other, because it really is. It's a country that is beautiful to go to. It's a country that when you get there, I have never had a bad experience in Peru. Every single person I talk to is just so happy you're there. They'll make jokes and they'll make fun and they'll talk about, football and how woeful their team is, and their team is now coming up and what it's doing. And of course, Machu Picchu, but they'll talk about other things. I just talked to somebody who, for example, I talked to whatever to Chris, who he couldn't be on the show today, but he's been talking to me for years, and you remember this during the pandemic. He was talking about Wakarapucara, this other site that looks like that citadel, has like the horns at the top. He's now developed a day program going out there that working with us to develop this program, and it's stunning. It is absolutely incredible, the fact that you can go out here and see this fortress. And yes, difficult to get to, but when you get out here, oh my gosh, you're in heaven. And I was talking to him and saying, when you get up there, and it's a joke you've heard in different movies and whatnot. It's like, if you ask God, you might just be close enough to hear you. And that's really special. So that's what I mean is that, if this was a country that I wasn't passionate about, and maybe I wouldn't be as upfront, as blunt about what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But it's a country that I have a deep love for. It's a country that I think is just missing out on its own potential. It's just scraping the barrel. And I'm not talking about more tourists. I'm talking about infrastructure. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Okay. So that trip last year, where the minister took off to Spain, which I'll keep repeating because she did. Up in the northern part of Peru, there was a contingent that was examining their runway at Chachapoyas and saying, this runway is too short. We can only land flights certain days of the week here. But then they realized that Cuenca's airport in Ecuador was shorter. The runway was shorter, yet they're landing wide-body heavy aircraft there. They formed a contingent that was down in Cuenca, that was examining the runway and trying to form a corridor between Cuenca and Chachapoyas. Could you imagine going from Ecuador to Peru and not having to go through Quito or Lima, flying from Cuenca right to Chachapoyas in the north and connecting? The connection you would have between the two countries, and that one move would allow you to bring northern Peru into the mix on every itinerary that goes to Machu Picchu without having to backtrack to Lima 5 times from Sunday. And I thought it was amazing. You know what was missing? Centralized mandated support from the government. That's what was missing.
And they just couldn't get it. They still don't have it?
They're working on it. And I'm supposed to get an update when I go this time around. So they're working on it. And, the people there desperately want it. The people there definitely want it. And, here's what I'll tell you, right? And I've worked with different tourist boards. And look, I'm not saying they're bad people, but you've got to make a decision. You've got to draw a line in the sand. We all have bosses. But you have to draw a line in the sand as to what's right is right. And I'm not talking about meeting me. I'm talking about the sport, right? So, for example, when that minister didn't show up, her staff was apologizing to us and apologizing to everybody. If your staff has to apologize for your behavior or your schedule, something's wrong. They should never have to do it. If you are in a position of power, a position where you are leading the charge for an industry as powerful as tourism, you must be a beacon of hope. You must be a beacon of ethics. You must be a beacon of sustainability. You must be a sense of pride. And you come to Colombia, there's a sense of pride. You go to Rwanda, there's a sense of pride. Again, Uganda doesn't have a very big tourist budget, but there's a sense of pride in the UWA. You go to other parts, other countries, there's a sense of pride. Sri Lanka is a great example of this. They are revamping right now and coming up. This is a country that has been through a civil war. Then the pandemic. Before the pandemic was a terrorist attack. After the pandemic was another uprising in the country. They haven't had a decent break in probably 12 years. And yet here they are, centralized, focused on tourism. Egypt, they've been waiting for a high season for 10 years. They got it. Everybody's centralized and focused on tourism. The government decentralizes the mandate that tourism is a priority for the country, right? It's a mandate that says it, and they mean it. And even now with what's happening in Gaza and everything else, they're not coming through and saying, oh, no, come. They're stating facts. They're stating simple facts about Egypt, but they're still planning this corridor. They're still planning a 2030 plan. Everything is on task. There is a centralized mandate for tourism. Where's that mandate in Peru? They deserve that mandate. It needs to be there. Everybody who works in Peru, there's such a beautiful aspect there.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why it's taken me this long of talking to you to realize that at the core of your passion is your love of people and seeing, them be able to live their best life, whatever that is, in whatever economic status
Hmm.
they have, and filtering down to children and to, the most basic level of how do we as humans, um, just live every day feeling fulfilled and right, it's through tourism. It just everything that you're saying, and it occurred to me that maybe in Peru the difference is there that is not their core value, whereas some of these other countries it's like how do we help our people, and they understand that, and maybe perhaps in Peru they don't have that core value, which is how do we help our people. Well, I know for sure they do in Colombia, right? We've seen that firsthand, I think.
Yeah, look, I think you've nailed it. In fact, your timing is perfect. Just today on the trek, I was with a bunch of German people with me, and they asked me, said, "Do you come back here all the time?" I said, "Well, yes. I have roots in Uganda. My family, my wife's family's history is in Uganda, and there's roots here. But beyond that, I just love coming here. I showed you the view that was back here. It is just gorgeous." And everybody here has a smile on their face, whether it's 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. They have a smile on their face. I've not met anybody who's grumpy. I've not met anybody who's not happy to see me here. And same thing with Rwanda, same thing with Colombia. So the people, they were asking me, well, why did you come back? They had the experience of the gorillas, and they go, my gosh, now I know why you're coming back. And I said, it's not the gorillas. It's not part of it. I pointed to the guide and the trekkers and the porters, and I said, they're the reasons I come back. I love talking to them. And he overheard me today. For example, I was sitting having lunch on this table on this log, and had this beautiful grilled cheese sandwich. It was something simple for me. And so the trekking guide, the head guide, sits next to me, and we're joking around in my broken Swahili, and we're having fun and talking about this. And I was talking about how long he's been a guide and where he's from and everything else. I showed him the picture of the 3-week-old baby. I said, I'll send that picture to you. And then I said, hey, do you want half my sandwich? And he had his lunch, and he told me it's what he's like, if you're sure. I said, absolutely. It wasn't he didn't have any food. It was the fact that I would actually break bread with him and have a meal with him was important to me. And so there's a dish here, which everybody who's traveled with me here knows. It's called ugali in Sukuma. It's basically cornmeal and kale. I obsess over this dish in Kenya and Uganda. Anytime I can get it in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, I jump at it because it's what I grew up eating. So I told him, I'm coming back in February. I'm going to text him, find out where he is. I'm going to make sure him and there's 2 other guides that I know here in Bwindi, we're going to sit together with one plate, and we're going to share ugali and sukuma together, because it's a staple food for them at night, and we're going to share. Mm-hmm. We're going to eat it together. And I thought it was important. I love doing that. He was so grateful, not because I gave him food. Again, he had lunch. It wasn't like he was starving. It was not that. He was grateful that I saw him as a man, mm-hmm. and not as somebody who's below him. It's very often that people come here and think that, oh, this is just some poor Ugandan or some poor Kenyan or some poor African, and they're beneath us. And that's not the case. And he appreciated the fact that I saw him as a peer. It wasn't about what my title is or his title. We were just 2 people reminiscing about life here and promising to each other that in a year from now, we're going to come back together, share a meal together. And it meant the world to me. And to him, it made him feel, you should have seen his face. He was beaming. It meant the world to him. And that was important. Mm-hmm. And I want that to happen in Peru. And you're right. Maybe that isn't their core value. Then my question becomes, well, why not? Mm-hmm. It should be. It's about the people. I have a friend of mine that runs a company in Italy that says this all the time. It's about the people. It's all about the people. And she's right. It is. It's about the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm actually surprised the minister of tourism, who is a woman, didn't get that. Usually women do tend to get that a little bit sooner than men, but what are you going to do?
She's the vice minister. She's the vice minister. And yeah, I mean, but it's not just her, right? I mean, she's just the latest. And I guess what disappointed me about her is everybody hoped she would be different. She came on to the scene, and everybody just saw something in her and said, she's going to be different. She's the vice minister. How she walks with grace. She commands a presence, and it was just that aspect of it that, this is huge, and that we, that there was, and it just, I don't know if maybe the expectations were too high, or that we all allowed ourselves to be disappointed. That's the part that just got to me, was that we had high hopes for her, not for the actual minister of tourism. We just saw him and said, okay, here comes the next in line. If you talk to the people at Pro Colombia, whether it's, Maria Jose or even the ex-vice minister, or any of them, you will see a gleam in their eye because of the hell they came from. Mm-hmm. You will see a gleam in their eye, just like glimmer. And it shines. They have a love for their country. Every time I see them, they will talk, and I don't ask for this. They're like, thank you so much. You've put us on the map. I didn't. They did it themselves. I just fell in love with the country, but they allowed me to fall in love with the country. They allowed me to do it. There's a graffiti artist in Cartagena, for example, in Basurto Market, that does this whole graffiti experience. And on his front board, because I had contributed to his community, or our foundation had, he wrote my name on the front of his board, not because I asked him to. I think he just did it. It's a source of pride. So every time somebody goes there, they circle it on like a WhatsApp chat or a WhatsApp message and go, look, your name is here. Your name is here. And I just tell them, I'm one of them. These are my people. I'm one of them. And it was because, it's not because I wanted to, it's because they allowed me. You know how passionate I get about Colombia. They allowed me to be part of that. They did it.
Yeah.
They did it.
You earned it, though. They allowed you, but you earned it.
No, thank you.
So that's what we're talking about next week, right?
I'm not talking about coming in and we're talking about Colombia next week. We are. Yeah. I know. I'm excited. It's with Peru. I'm not saying that, okay, they've got to allow me. I'm not talking about that. You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. Love of people. And I was trying to find the words for it since our last broadcast, and I couldn't find them, but I think you just did. I do have that. I remember sitting in that community in Medellin, talking to these kids and whatnot, and just seeing just this possibility. And then I remember seeing these women in Peru that with the weaving community, and seeing the possibilities in their kids. It's just endless. Somebody has to just give them a chance. They're not looking for handouts. They're not looking to be felt sorry for. They just simply want to be able to earn a full day's income, and they want to have a mandate from a centralized body, a government that basically says, we care about you. Yeah. We're rowing in the same direction. I don't understand why that's complicated.
Yeah. Seems like low-hanging fruit, truthfully, but well, this has been fun.
Well, I think next week I'm going to have to get off this rant and actually go back to, maybe I might have to have a drink before we do the broadcast next time, just to be able to simmer down, or maybe go watch a movie or something to be able to get off this high horse.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is awesome. It's been fun to talk to you about this truthfully, and it's going to be fun to talk about Cartagena. I have to know I know, and you were, where were you? You were in Kenya before you moved on up to Uganda, right? Isn't that where you were earlier? And so there they do sundowners.
Yep.
What's
correct.
going on
correct.
I know it's like 6:00 where you are, 7 where you are right now. What's happening? How are you going to end your day?
I'm having a beer next to the fireplace. It's actually really nice. I wish I could say we're doing a sundowner, but none of our legs are moving. We're the adrenaline's left our body. We can barely walk. We're out on high, and I love the people at this place. It's something to be said. When I came out, and George, who's one of the managers here, he came out and he didn't recognize me at first. And he goes, "It's you. You're back. You're back. My heart is sinking because you're back." And we embraced each other and we hugged. Aww. And then Hilda, who works in here, who takes care of the customer service, recognized us right away. And what was incredible is that they're learning along the way in terms of what they do. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. I don't eat eggs, and I don't eat meat, obviously. And they figured out that I want half portions, don't eat eggs. They learned, adapted adapted the dish, adapted everything around it. And I thought that was pretty special. So just being able to come off this, get out of the car and come here and have this person embrace you and say this. And even our driver that got us here, I remembered him. from 2 years ago. And he felt, it was amazing. He told me, he goes, I was embarrassed. I didn't remember you. So I called and talked to the office and figured it out and tried to put two and two together. I didn't expect him to do that.
Wow.
But he literally took it upon himself to he was like a mission to figure out where we had not seen each other. How come he couldn't remember me? We sorted it out. We can. And now we've been talking about his community. We've been talking about, his healthcare in his community. And like one of the challenges in Uganda is that, the areas, the communities around tourism get the support, but the communities away from tourism don't get as much support. So we were talking about, healthcare and education and whatnot. And there may be a possibility that we can collaborate, on something here. And I thought that was pretty powerful. It just happened because we were talking and we were allowed to talk and we were allowed to connect.
That's so great. This has been so much fun, Ashish, as always.
Likewise.
All right, my friend. Well, shall we sign off?
I agree. I'm going to go get my best Bear Grylls impression on with a beer by the fireplace and go tell tall tales.
All right. Well, until next time. Next time we'll jet away to Cartagena or beyond Cartagena.
Beyond Cartagena, we're going to be talking about Colombia, beyond Cartagena, and talking about the tourism mechanism as a source for good in that country. And it won't be a rant. It's going to be something really great, talking about what that country has achieved. And it's going to be a beacon and a model that I use in talks everywhere around the world. And I hope that whoever listens to that episode is inspired by it. And I hope the ministers of Peru listen to it as well and use it to actually understand why I want them to do so well.
Yeah. All right. Bye, Ashish.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.